April 8, 1943. 27,000 feet above Caen, France. Through the crystal-clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5, Oberleutnant Ralph Hermeken couldn't hide his grin behind the oxygen mask. He watched the awkward shapes climbing slowly toward his formation, amused by what he saw. The veteran ace of Jagdgeschwader 26 studied the unfamiliar American fighters making their first appearance over occupied Europe. "Die armies have sent us flying milk bottles," he joked to his wingman, laughing at the sight of the bulky Republic P-47 Thunderbolts struggling to gain altitude. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group were pushing upward in tight formation. Their 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines working hard against their 7-ton weight. To German pilots used to the elegant Spitfires or agile Soviet fighters, these massive machines looked almost ridiculous. Barrel-shaped bodies with large bubble canopies, small wings for their size, and enormous propellers unmatched in any Luftwaffe aircraft. What Hermeken and his fellow pilots didn't realize, circling above like predators, was that they were witnessing the arrival of a weapon that would soon dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter force piece by piece. In less than 2 years, these flying milk bottles would evolve from being mocked to becoming feared. The roar of their .850 caliber Browning machine guns would soon be the most terrifying sound in German skies. The math of destruction was already built into those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined firing rate of 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to rip a Messerschmitt apart in just 2 seconds. The transformation began that April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, commander of the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation preparing to attack. A veteran of the RAF's Eagle Squadron, who had only recently transitioned from Spitfires, Blakesley knew something his men did not yet grasp. That survival in a P-47 meant unlearning everything they knew about dogfighting. The Thunderbolt was unlike any other fighter. While German engineers focused on lightweight interceptors built for climbing and turning, Republic Aviation designed something entirely new. A high-altitude powerhouse that relied on mass, horsepower, and overwhelming firepower to change the rules of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots spread across the French sky that morning were men who would later become legends, future aces whose names would terrify Luftwaffe crews. But on April 8, 1943, they were rookies flying an untested machine against the most seasoned fighter force on Earth. The Germans had been at war since 1939, veterans of campaigns in Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans, on the other hand, had zero combat experience. This story is about how industrial strength overcame tactical brilliance, how mass production and innovation merged into unmatched superiority, and how German laughter turned to fear once they learned what synchronized Browning machine guns could do to an aircraft at 400 yards. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was born out of crisis in June 1940. As German forces swept across France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent orders from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They wanted a high-altitude interceptor that could challenge the Luftwaffe's best. What Kartveli created instead was a monster that would redefine aerial combat. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli told his team, "but it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." When the XP-47B prototype first took flight on May 6, 1941, it stunned everyone who saw it. Weighing nearly 10,000 pounds empty, 65% more than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer, it was enormous. The turbo supercharger system, with complex ductwork running through the rear fuselage, gave it an almost swollen appearance. Test pilots who saw it for the first time often asked the same question: "Does this thing actually fly?" It did, and it flew like nothing else at high altitude. The 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp radial engine delivered 2,000 horsepower and maintained full performance at 27,000 feet, where German engines struggled for air. Its turbo supercharger, powered by exhaust gases, gave the P-47 sea-level power even in the thin stratosphere. At first, not everyone was impressed. Major Hubert "Hub" Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group in Bridgeport, Connecticut, openly disliked the aircraft. Between September 1942 and January 1943, his unit lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training. The P-47 killed more Americans in training than Germans would in its early months of combat. It ground-looped on landings, torque rolled on takeoff, and dove so fast that pilots experienced compressibility, control surfaces locking as shock waves formed on the wings. Yet those who learned to tame it discovered something remarkable. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma, who would later become one of America's top aces with 27 victories, recalled his first flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The first combat encounters in April and May 1943 seemed to prove the Germans right. The P-47 couldn't turn with the Focke-Wulf 190 or climb with the Messerschmitt Bf 113. It lacked agility at medium altitudes, and Luftwaffe pilots quickly developed tactics to exploit these flaws, attacking from below and forcing turning fights where their aircraft had the advantage. Oberst Joseph "Pips" Priller, commander of Jagdgeschwader 26, reported after his first engagement, "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys call them easy targets pretending to be fighters." The numbers initially supported his confidence. In their first month, American groups lost 14 Thunderbolts while downing only 3 German planes. British pilots watching from their Spitfires quietly questioned America's aircraft choice, joking that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the spacious cockpit. But beneath those early struggles, something important was happening. Something German intelligence failed to see. The P-47s being shot down had endured extreme punishment before falling. One aircraft returned from a mission on May 4th, riddled with 21 cannon holes and more than 100 bullet strikes, damage that would have destroyed any Spitfire or Messerschmitt. The rugged radial engine, lacking a vulnerable coolant system, shrugged off hits that would have crippled liquid-cooled fighters. And when the Thunderbolts did land their shots, the effect was devastating. Their 8 machine guns created a zone of concentrated fire no German pilot had ever faced. Unlike early war fighters with rifle-caliber weapons or limited cannon ammo, the P-47 could fire continuously for over 30 seconds, a lifetime in combat. The moment that began changing German perceptions came on June 26, 1943, over Le Mans, France. Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron was flying in a formation of 48 P-47s, returning from escort duty, when they were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s of Jagdgeschwader 26, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger brother of the famed Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a textbook dive attack from the sun, carrying a massive speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, flying at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire of multiple attackers. Taking heavy damage within seconds of combat, 20mm cannon shells tore through Johnson's aircraft. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid sprayed across the cockpit, and flames burst behind the instrument panel as the engine cowling ripped away. Johnson was wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments. He tried to bail out, only to discover the canopy was jammed shut. A 20mm shell had exploded in the track, welding it closed. Trapped inside a burning aircraft at 27,000 feet, Johnson faced what seemed like certain death. What followed defied all expectations of aircraft survivability. With no visibility through the oil-covered windscreen, a damaged engine shaking violently, and controls that barely responded, Johnson somehow leveled the plane and aimed it toward England. Despite catastrophic damage, the P-47 kept flying, something no other fighter could have endured. But the ordeal wasn't over. A lone Focke-Wulf 190 from 2 JG-26, flown by an unidentified German pilot, soon spotted the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the channel at under 170 meters. Although historical records have never confirmed his identity, multiple German reports point to a few possible names. What happened next became one of the most remarkable encounters in air combat history. Positioning behind Johnson's P-47, the German pilot opened fire with 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns. Unable to maneuver, Johnson ducked behind his armor plate and prayed. The Thunderbolt absorbed every shell. When the German's cannons ran dry, he continued firing with his machine guns before pulling alongside to observe the damage. Johnson could clearly see his face, young, blonde, his confidence fading into disbelief and fear. The German fired his remaining rounds, but the P-47 refused to go down. Finally, the pilot saluted Johnson, shook his head in amazement, and turned away, likely out of ammunition. Against all odds, Johnson's P-47 made it back to Manston, the engine dying as it touched the runway. His crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One shell had exploded inches from Johnson's head, another against the armor behind his seat. The engine was riddled with damage, control cables half severed, and 3 of the 4 main structural supports shot through. Yet the aircraft had carried him home. The survival of Johnson's P-47 stunned both air forces. American engineers examining the wreck realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, upon receiving combat reports from JG-26, initially refused to believe them. No aircraft could withstand such punishment, but multiple testimonies confirmed it. The Thunderbolt had endured the full force of Germany's best fighter and survived. By mid-1943, American pilots were beginning to master the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, discovered through experience what worked. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. What had once been seen as the Thunderbolt's weakness, its massive size, became its advantage. In a dive, nothing could touch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach speeds of 550 meters, faster than any German fighter even in a vertical dive. That speed could then be converted into altitude through a zoom climb, leaving enemies helpless. Captain Walker, Bud Mahurin, one of the first American aces in Europe, refined this method into what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, though pilots called it the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Rather than dogfighting, P-47 units climbed to 30,000 feet, above the Luftwaffe's effective range. When enemy aircraft appeared below, Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive at extreme speed, unleashing devastating fire. German pilots described the experience as flying into a wall of lead. Anything caught in their crossfire didn't just fall, it was obliterated. The full extent of American firepower was revealed on August 17, 1943. During the dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany at that point, the mission highlighted both the Thunderbolt's limited range, even with drop tanks, and its overwhelming lethality when properly employed. Major David Schilling led the 62nd Fighter Squadron in an attack on a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110s preparing to strike B-17 bombers. The twin-engine German destroyers, armed with cannons and rockets, were designed for bomber interception but lacked agility. Schilling's group dived from 28,000 feet. Heinrich Roth, a surviving German gunner, later described it. The Americans came down like hammers from the sky. I fired and saw my rounds hit. The fighter didn't even shake. Then he fired, and the aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. In under a minute, 8 Bf-110s were annihilated. German pilots had never faced such concentrated firepower. Each Thunderbolt carried 8 50 caliber machine guns with 425 rounds each, 3,400 total, nearly 900 pounds of ammunition. When fired at the convergence distance of 300 yards, their ballistic paths met in a 6-foot circle, unleashing roughly 100 projectiles per second at 2,900 feet per second. American firepower was unmatched. While German fighters were limited to 120-200 cannon rounds, American pilots could fire continuously for over 30 seconds. Their ammunition mix, armor-piercing, incendiary, and tracer, was designed to penetrate, ignite, and destroy simultaneously. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would later become America's top ace in Europe, explained it best. "When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode." I saw a 109 literally split in half. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was facing another harsh truth. The Thunderbolt performed better the higher it went. Its turbo-supercharged Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine maintained full power up to 30,000 feet, while German fighters with mechanical superchargers lost effectiveness above $25,000. On October 8, 1943, one of Germany's most successful aces, Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, discovered this too late. Leading a formation against B-17s at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp's FW-190A6 became sluggish in the thin air. Its BMW 801 engine struggled for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the ground, while the P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dived from above. From 32,000 feet, the German fighters were easy targets. Robert Johnson, now a seasoned combat pilot nearing ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Philipp's distinct Focke-Wulf, marked by its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was precise. Opened fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection. Observed hits along the entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute seen. Philipp's death sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best pilots, a man who had survived over 500 missions across both the Eastern and Western fronts, couldn't withstand the Thunderbolt, what hope did the average flyer have? The German High Command immediately ordered an investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report, presented to Reich Marshal Hermann Göring in November 1943, was alarming. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could reach. Its dive speed neared the sound barrier. The plane's protection included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, one 2-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection panels around the engine. Most concerning, its rugged airframe could take damage that would destroy 3 normal fighters and still make it home. By January 1944, a new model began arriving in England, marking the P-47's full transformation from a joke to a nightmare. The P-47 D-22 introduced a Hamilton Standard hydromatic propeller, paddle-bladed 13 feet wide, and designed to bite into the air like giant oars. The improvement in climb rate was dramatic. Early Thunderbolts managed only 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, while the new versions could hit 3,000, matching or even surpassing German aircraft at most altitudes. The larger propeller also boosted acceleration, letting the P-47 gain energy faster in level flight. In February 1944, veteran pilot Hedman Heinz Knocke of Jagdgeschwader 11, after more than 200 combat missions, faced the upgraded Thunderbolts during a bomber interception near Hanover. His diary entry told the story. "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced to formation near Hanover expecting the usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to break away, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The new propeller didn't just improve performance, it changed the sound. The P-47's thunderous roar, created by blade tips nearing supersonic speeds, could be heard for miles. German ground troops learned to recognize the sound instantly. A deep, menacing rumble they called Donnerschlag, thunderclap. By March 1944, Thunderbolts fitted with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. Standard setups carried either 2 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending range beyond 1,000 miles. Thanks to the new propeller, even heavily loaded P-47s could fight effectively right after dropping tanks. The Luftwaffe responded by focusing on bomber formations, hoping to cause enough damage to halt the American daylight offensive. But this meant flying through the P-47 escort screen, a near-suicidal mission. German pilots began developing a reluctant respect, even fear, for the massive American fighters. Major Günther Rauhl, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, mostly on the Eastern Front, barely survived a P-47 encounter on March 6, 1944. Later, he recalled in a post-war interview, "We saw them above us, big silhouettes against the sun. Someone joked, 'Here come the flying pigs.' No one laughed 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass wiped out 3 of our planes, just gone. Their guns didn't fire in bursts. They unleashed solid streams of lead. Being caught in that stream meant instant death." Escort missions revealed another P-47 strength: endurance. While German fighters burned fuel quickly at full power, the Thunderbolt's big radial engine cruised efficiently at high altitude, allowing it to stay with bombers for hours, rotating top cover while keeping enough fuel for combat and return. When P-51 Mustangs began taking over long-range escort duties in spring 1944, P-47 units shifted toward ground attack missions, a role that would make them one of the most feared weapons in the German war zone. The change accelerated in April 1944 as Allied forces prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's 8 50-caliber machine guns proved devastating against ground targets. Its armor-piercing incendiary rounds could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire shredded softer targets in seconds. A 2-second burst sent 160 half-inch projectiles into a space the size of a truck. The addition of bombs and rockets turned the P-47 into a true multi-role weapon. The D-25 model carried 2 1,000-pound bombs under its wings and a 500-pound bomb beneath the fuselage, matching the bomb load of early medium bombers. Later models added rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, HVARs, each equal in power to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, described P-47 attacks vividly. "They came in so low you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming, machine guns hammering. A line of our trucks vanished. 20 vehicles turned into flaming wreckage in one pass. The psychological impact was devastating. We called them Jabos, fighter bombers, but these were something else. Flying artillery with sniper precision." On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe learned how completely air superiority had shifted. Over 500 P-47s covered the D-Day invasion, forming an impenetrable shield over the beaches. German fighters that tried to reach the landing zones were decimated. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We tried breaking through at dawn, 12 fighters from our group. I was the only one who returned. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our planes into metal rain." In the weeks after D-Day, P-47s systematically destroyed German transport by day. The numbers were staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts destroyed 651 locomotives, 3,147 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn wagons. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, crippling its ability to counter Allied advances. The Germans tried every countermeasure: reinforced armor, more anti-aircraft guns, better camouflage, but nothing worked. The P-47's blend of speed, armor, and firepower made it nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 80-mm flak guns struggled to track them at low altitude. Meanwhile, the Thunderbolt was proving equally effective in the Pacific. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, found its toughness ideal for the region's vast distances and rough conditions. Colonel Neil Kirby, the unit's commander, crafted tactics specifically for the Pacific theater. On October 11, 1943, Kirby led 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, shooting down 6 himself and earning the Medal of Honor. Japanese pilots, used to agile but fragile American planes, were shocked by the Thunderbolt's mix of firepower and resilience. Ace Saburo Sakai later wrote, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 in seconds, seemed useless. I hit one Thunderbolt dozens of times and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying, streams of bullets that tore planes apart. The P-47N, designed for the Pacific, added extended-range wet wings holding 93 gallons each, giving it a range of 350 miles. It would later escort B-29 bombers to Japan, proof that the short-ranged fighter of 1943 had evolved into a true long-range weapon. Perhaps the P-47's greatest vindication came in encounters with German jets. The Me-262, capable of 540 mph, should have been untouchable. But Thunderbolt pilots found 2 advantages: catching jets during takeoff or landing, and diving attacks from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the first to down a Me-262 in a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, his Thunderbolt hit nearly 500 km/h, fast enough to intercept the jet in level flight. Meyer reported, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape. The concentrated firepower of 850 caliber guns proved more effective against jets than anyone expected." By early 1945, the specialized P-47M variant arrived to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection producing 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, it could reach 470 km at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept jets under the right conditions. Major George Bostwick of the 63rd Fighter Squadron downed 2 Me-262s in March 1945. His after-action report summed it up. "The jets are faster, but they can't turn, and they can't take hits. One burst from our guns and they fall apart. They have to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we get them." The ultimate display of American industrial power came during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate attempt to wipe out Allied air forces on January 1, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, many flown by their best remaining pilots, launched surprise attacks on airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 Airfield near Metz, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the strike initially succeeded, destroying 22 Thunderbolts on the ground. A captured German pilot, brought to the Allied command post, pointed at the burning wreckage of American planes and sneered, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's reply would become legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. Gesturing toward the airfield where crews were already clearing damaged planes and preparing for replacements, he calmly said, "By tomorrow we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk quickly vanished. Within 48 hours, brand new P-47D-40 Thunderbolts arrived from England, filling the flight line. During Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 trained pilots, including many veteran instructors and squadron leaders, losses that Germany could never recover from. In contrast, the Americans lost 134 aircraft across all targeted bases, all replaced within a week. The numbers told a simple truth: Germany was fighting a losing battle. Republic Aviation built 15,183 P-47s during the war, more than any other U.S. fighter. At peak production, the Farmingdale, Long Island plant completed 1 Thunderbolt every hour, while Evansville, Indiana's factory, constructed on former farmland in 1942, produced 500 per month by 1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. Its engine alone contained 2,400 precision-machined components. American workers, many of them women with no prior experience in aviation, assembled these complex machines with unmatched accuracy, often exceeding pre-war manufacturing standards. Ammunition production was equally vast. Each P-47 sortie consumed roughly 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, and with hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily, monthly usage exceeded 10 million rounds by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri alone produced 30 million rounds per month, each precisely manufactured to ensure flawless performance. Fuel use was just as massive. Each Thunderbolt burned around 100 gallons of fuel per hour in flight, up to 300 in combat with water injection. By late 1944, the 9th Air Force consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly, all shipped across the Atlantic in tankers built by American industry. Even more impressive was the U.S. pilot training program. By 1944, America was graduating 30,000 pilots annually, more than Germany trained during the entire war. Each P-47 pilot logged at least 400 flight hours before entering combat, including 100 in advanced fighters. By comparison, late-war German pilots often had fewer than 100 total hours. The difference showed in battle. American pilots were well trained in formation, flying, navigation, gunnery, and tactics. They even practiced against captured German aircraft to understand enemy capabilities. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, who arrived in England in September 1944, embodied this preparation. "I had 420 flight hours, including 75 in the P-47, he said. "I'd fired at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, studied gun camera footage. I knew exactly what to do on my first mission. The German pilot I faced didn't have half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight." By March 1945, even veteran German pilots admitted the truth. Oberleutnant Josef Priller, once known for mocking the pregnant cow Thunderbolts, told German officials, though his comments were censored for morale reasons, "The Thunderbolt is the best fighter-bomber ever built. Its weapons never jam, never overheat, and it carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and fights like a true fighter." But it's not just the machine. It's what it represents: unlimited American production. They lose 10 and build 20. We lose one, and it's gone forever. Their pilots train better than our instructors. They have fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. We have only courage, and courage without resources means defeat. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe was nearly destroyed. Fuel shortages grounded most planes. Experienced pilots were gone and airfields lay in ruins. Even when aircraft could fly, facing P-47 formations that dominated the sky from ground level to 40,000 feet was suicide. Feldwebel Klaus Bretschneider, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flew just one combat mission before the war's end. 4 Thunderbolts dived from above, he recalled. "I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader opened fire from 500 meters. My plane shook violently, the engine exploded, and the wing tore off. I barely escaped. In my parachute, I saw my entire squadron destroyed in seconds." The psychological toll was devastating. German pilots developed Jabo fever, stress symptoms triggered merely by reports of Thunderbolts nearby. Troops on the ground panicked at the distant roar of its engine. Knowing survival meant finding cover immediately. The results were staggering. 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 3,315 on the ground, 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored vehicles, and tens of thousands of trucks and wagons. In the Pacific, P-47s destroyed nearly 700 Japanese aircraft in the air and 150 on the ground, along with thousands of vehicles and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, mostly flying P-47s, conducted over 213,000 combat sorties, dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds, and launched 60,000 rockets. They achieved a 4.6-to-1 kill ratio while suffering the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Behind these numbers lay human cost. The Luftwaffe lost around 28,000 pilots, most to American machine gun fire. Germany's veteran flyers, trained over years, were replaced by rookies with barely 30 combat hours, while P-47 pilots averaged over 200 hours. Captured German intelligence reports from 1943 to 1945 showed a complete reversal of opinion on the Thunderbolt. April 1943. Large, unmaneuverable, minimal threat. December 1943. Exceptional altitude performance, significant threat. June 1944. Dominant fighter bomber, critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945. Best fighter bomber of the war, unsurvivable in direct combat. At a 1985 reunion in Phoenix, Arizona, German and American veterans met in peace. Former Luftwaffe Commander General Adolf Galland reflected, "In 1943, we laughed at the P-47, calling it a bomber pretending to be a fighter. We were wrong. The Americans built an aircraft for their kind of war, focused on production, firepower, and survival. In a war of attrition, the fighter that could endure and hit hardest would always win." Galland described flying a captured P-47 after the war. "The power was incredible. It climbed like it was falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable, visibility perfect, controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor. But what amazed me most was realizing they built over 15,000 of these while fighting on two fronts. That's when I knew we never had a chance." German pilots nicknamed its guns Roosevelt's piano for their deadly rhythm. "Once you heard that sound," Galland said, "you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time." The P-47's engineering reflected America's industrial philosophy, power through endurance. Its wing spars supported 3 times its weight. Its engine mounts could withstand 12 Gs. Every control cable had backups. Its 8 machine guns, each electrically heated and independently synchronized, created a storm of bullets that tore through anything in their path. Some German veterans later claimed they lost only because of American numbers, not quality. But records proved otherwise. When numbers were equal, P-47 still dominated. Their 8 heavy guns created a cloud of fire so dense that even imperfect aim guaranteed destruction. The ammunition's delayed action incendiary rounds burned hot enough to melt aluminum, far deadlier than German 20mm shells, which often exploded too early. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine fighter ever mass-produced, 10,000 pounds empty, more powerful than many bombers of the previous war. It was built by the thousands, flown by young men barely out of school, and maintained by mechanics trained in weeks. In less than 2 years, it went from being mocked as a flying milk bottle to becoming the most feared aircraft in the German Air Force's history. Today, a restored P-47D stands at the U.S. Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. Its display includes a strip of gun camera film showing a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under fire, alongside a quote from a captured German pilot in 1945. "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly fighters that couldn't turn or climb. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to. They just pointed their guns, and you ceased to exist." The P-47 Thunderbolt entered the war as a joke and ended it as a legend. 8 50 caliber machine guns had rewritten the rules of air warfare and buried the Luftwaffe beneath a storm of lead. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the sky belonged to America.